Group of activists mad at the 1% and taking aim at Wall Street. Not the great GameStop short squeeze, but Occupy Wall Street, which started 10 years ago. Back then, hundreds of protesters took over Zuccotti Park in Lower Manhattan and marched to the financial district. The movement would last 59 days, but its ripple effects would stretch for years. Here's CNBC's Leslie Picker.
In the shadows of the financial crisis, between the skyscrapers of Lower Manhattan, Occupy Wall Street began. Triggered by a single tweet, September 17th, Wall Street, bring 10. Then came the catchphrase, the fight, the encampment, and the clashes. The fall of 2011, a perfect storm for the Occupy movement. Anti-government protests across the Arab world. Stateside, the economy was ravaged, marked by bailouts instead of jail time, and an iPhone in seemingly every pocket. 1 decade ago, it's estimated that 1,000 protesters flooded the streets to rally behind a common enemy, Wall Street.
And the experience in the park was electric. It was like something had burst open in New York City.
We're like a lightning bolt. Like none of us, I don't think, really expected the impact that we had.
The Occupy protests spread to 82 countries in 2011, but without clear demands for what they wanted, the movement fell flat in the eyes of its critics.
These kids downtown, I define them as babies in adults' bodies.
At the time, Wall Street didn't take the occupiers seriously, according to Mike MAYO, a bank analyst who attended the protests for research.
This was seen as a fringe group, and the reaction was basically go home, get a job, and take a shower.
After a few months, the movement fizzled out, and in the end, it failed to dismantle the system. 10 years later, the only people occupying Wall Street are more Wall Streeters, the industry adding more than 1 million jobs since 2011. Income inequality, well, that too has widened, the pandemic only exacerbating the divide. But many are now crediting the Occupy spirit as the launching pad for a new wave of left-wing activism in America.
Occupy unleashed a passion and a belief and a sense of courage.
Michael Levitin wrote a recently published book on Occupy Wall Street. He credits the movement for the success of politicians like Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders.
This issue is bigger than any one of us.
And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who recently emblazoned Tax the Rich on a dress at the Met Gala. He also says Occupy gave rise to the George Floyd protests, the Women's March, March for Our Lives, and more recently, the Sunrise Movement, a push to address climate change.
Occupy showed the way that people can simply rebel when they've had enough, and to give them courage to do that and to see each other as powerful allies in a movement that's able to actually move the needle.
Sticking it to Wall Street is still in fashion. As you mentioned, Shep, Occupy Wall Street morphed into Wall Street Bets earlier this year. Mom and pop traders banding together to take on the big guy, the hedge funds that were betting for companies like GameStop and AMC to fail. And you know what? This time, the metaphorical 99% won.